What's up everybody, it's Charles, and today on the Mark V, we are doing a high pressure fuel pump. We are replacing the cam follower. Well, we're going to inspect it and then go ahead and replace it. And we're putting a new thrust sensor on it, which is this guy right here. This is an old revision with the part number ending in E. We need to install the newest one, which ends in K. And if you're replacing the high pressure pump, go ahead and put a new thrust sensor in it. Anyway, you're going to have to take it off and transfer it. If you don't, great opportunity to put a new one on. So the Mark V had a check engine light dealing with some high pressure fuel issues, and everything pointed to the thrust sensor. So if you have the BPY engine code, VW, or Audi, some of the codes related to these failures are going to be a P0087, a P1093, and a P2293. All related to high pressure fuel. This is also something you may want to do as maintenance every 20,000 miles or so, because even the updated followers get a little weird. This is a brand new one still in the package. They get a little weird with time, and it's a super easy, super cheap piece of maintenance, so you don't have to end up replacing the whole pump and a camshaft and a whole bunch of other parts. Now, if you're just joining on the Mark V, this is the Project Rusto mod that I'm doing with FCP Euro. So I will put links to the pump and all the parts down in the description. You can check it out. I have also done a video a little more in depth on the failure of these components. I'll link it up in the card, whatever side it shows up on. I can't tell when I'm looking at the camera. Click that little white circle with the eye in it. It'll take you there. You can learn more about how these parts fail, and boy, do these fail. In fact, it's worth noting there may actually be some of these out there still under warranty. There's a 10-year, 120K warranty extension on the cam, the high pressure pump, the follower if it's failing, not if it's just worn out a little bit. It has to be failed. There's, of course, criteria. You need to talk to your local VW or Audi dealer. Of course, make sure you got your eye protection, and I like to wear gloves for these kind of jobs. That's enough rambling for me. If you're doing this job, be safe. Let's get going. First thing we're going to do is remove the engine cover by disconnecting the airflow meter, undoing the clips at the back, pulling the hose off. This one's pretty broken, so it came off nice and easy. Before we do anything with the high pressure fuel system, what we want to do is bleed off the pressure. We're going to bleed that high pressure off by disconnecting the high pressure fuel pump and then start it up and let it run for about 10 seconds. Don't worry that the airbox isn't on or the airflow meter's not connected. Our check engine light is on anyway, and the car should definitely start and run long enough to bleed off the high pressure fuel. Once we let the high pressure fuel bleed off, if we have our thrust sensor connected, let's go ahead and disconnect it. We're going to need to take the Schrader valve fitting off of the pump in order to get access to one of the T30s. This is where you're going to want to take your rag and tuck it under the fitting. This is also where you want to make 100% sure you got your safety glasses on, because even after bleeding the high pressure fuel off, you'll still get some fuel pressure. Take our 13mm. I like to put the rag over it, break it loose, give it a second as we loosen it to let any fuel pressure bleed off. Take our little valve out the rest of the way. Then I'll take the rag and tuck it a little lower to catch any fuel that might still drip out. Now, once we have that fitting removed, we want to loosen the hard line at the bottom of the pump. This is going to be a 17mm, and you need to be really careful of the parts right next to it because you don't want to break them. Once it's loose, I usually take my hand on both sides of it and spin the fitting off that way. If you have an early revision 06, the other one is going to have a banjo bolt on it, which is really tricky to get to. We're super fortunate that this has a rubber hose, so we don't have to mess with that banjo bolt. If you have to do that banjo bolt, you'll need a triple square, and that bolt is a must replace. Next, we'll take the 3 T30s out that hold the pump to the housing. Carefully lift. You might even have to rock it back and forth. And then with the pump out, we can pull our follower out and inspect it. Our first check is going to be the follower. If you see any damage on the top of this follower where it's concave or it looks like it's starting to wear through or heavily scratched, you want to go ahead and put a new one on. If it's worn completely through, like there's nothing here, then of course you have bigger problems and we need to do a much bigger repair. For how cheap these things are, it may just be worth it. If you take it off, go ahead and replace it. Just because the follower's good doesn't mean you don't have any issues. You also need to take a look at the end of the pump At some point, someone might have put a follower in and not done the full repair, replacing the high pressure fuel pump. Even though our follower is not worn through and our pump's not damaged, we're gonna go ahead and put a new one on anyway. We're actually pretty close to just removing it from here. All we have left is this bottom hose to take off. I'm gonna spray it with some WD-40, pull the pump up, and we need to get the clamp off or loose. We'll come up from the bottom. Now that the clamp's rotated in a little bit better spot, we can squeeze it, slide it down. Once the clamp is down, then we can use our pick to walk the hose off the rest of the way. Before putting the new pump on, we have to do a couple of things. One, we want to clean the well where the pump goes. We'll also lubricate it right before we put the pump on. But we also need to make sure that the cam is in a good position, meaning we don't want one of the high points of the lobe facing out. That's going to require more effort to put the pump on. If the cam's not on one of the flat parts, rotate the engine around until it is. That'll make installing the pump so much easier and less risk of damaging the pump. Once we're sure we're on the flat portion of the cam, go ahead and clean the well out really good. Next, we're going to take our new follower, put a little engine oil. I like a little assembly lube. Put a little on the outside of it, get it nice and lubricated, drop it down in. When we get our new pump, oftentimes it doesn't have these fittings on here. Ours came with them on, which is awesome. Still not a bad idea to double check and make sure they're properly torqued. The best way to do that is to clamp it in a vise and do it before you install the pump. The fitting for the hose is torqued to 30 Newton meters. The fitting that the hard line goes into is torqued to 40 Newton meters. If you loosen this fitting, you are supposed to replace it. Go ahead and put a little bit of lubricant on the fitting where the hose is gonna go. I like to hold that hose with my hose clamp pliers. Install the pump. Go ahead and put the clamp on the hose. Once the lower hose is on, before you install the pump, lubricate the seal here with a little bit of engine oil. That'll help it go in a little easier. Install it in its well. Start all three of the bolts by hand. For the next part, what I like to do is I like to take the pump and I like to push it all the way in as far as it'll go and just barely snug the 3 bolts up. You want to do this in stages. If you do one all the way in, that's when you run the risk of breaking the pump. Next, we'll go ahead and torque these to 10 Newton meters. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to put our high pressure line into the fitting. Oftentimes, you do have to take the line and kind of push it up into that fitting. This end is a ball, this end is a cup, so that it sits properly. We'll get our fitting and we'll start it by hand. Once it's started, it's easy to snug up just with your finger. We'll go ahead and tighten that down. There is a torque spec for this. It's listed below. You do need a special fitting for your torque wrench in order to properly torque that. So I usually just try and get it as close as I can by feel. Next, we'll install our updated thrust sensor. Torque that to 15 Newton meters. This is another component that really does require a special socket in order to properly torque it. A normal deep 24 millimeter may not fit over the connector, so I usually just use a box wrench and snug it down to what feels pretty close to 15 Newton meters. 15 Newton meters isn't going to be that much. And finally, we need to put our Schrader valve fitting on. The repair manual doesn't list a torque spec for this, so I usually just snug it down. Go ahead and plug your fuel pump in. We'll put our cap back on for our Schrader valve, plug our thrust sensor in, put our loom back. Now, all we got to do, put the engine cover back on, clear any faults that are stored, take it on a test drive, and make sure everybody's happy. All right, that's it. Not too hard. Hopefully that fixed your problem. If it didn't, well, don't forget to check that low side fuel. I think that's one people miss all the time. The fuel pressure regulators built into the fuel filter. Make sure that's right. Fuel pump control module and in-tank pump. Guys, questions, comments, you know what to do. If you like the video, thumbs up button is what you hit to let me know. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, thanks to FCP Euro and Miley for sponsoring this entire Mark V project. More videos coming soon. Check out the playlist if you'd like. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Good luck, happy fuel pumping, and I'll talk to you again next time.